Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and I'm very excited to introduce you to Krista Clive-Smith. Krista is a personal branding expert, speaker, and serial social entrepreneur. She is the founder and CEO of the KCS Family of Companies, which is the parent company for Clutch Personal Branding, Empire Thought Leadership, Merack Publishing, and Little Authors Academy. Her first company, Organized for Life, went on to become the first professional organizing franchise system in the world. She was named to the top 40 under 40 list of outstanding business professionals and was recognized as a San Diego Woman Magazine's 2019 Woman of Distinction. She is the award-winning author of the book Get Noticed, Be Remembered, Creating a Personal Brand Strategy for Success. And I have it on Kindle. It is an excellent book, and I recommend it. Krista is an incredible human and incredible at what she does. And I have so much respect for you, Krista, and it is such a delight to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Well, the mutual respect, adoration, and love, it's just twofold because I just think you are one of the most incredible beings on this planet. And it is a privilege and an honor to share in this conversation with you. Yay!
Thank you. The feeling is definitely mutual. So I would love, if it's all right, for us to start with just getting to know you a little bit. Like if you're willing to share just a little about your story and how you got to doing the amazing things that you are doing.
Okay, well, I'll give you the highlight reel. I'm a born and raised Canadian girl. So I grew up in small town Canada, and I was a competitive figure skater from the age of 4. And at the height of my career, I had a career-ending injury, which very quickly taught me an important lesson that informed a lot of what I do today with personal branding, which is so often what we do, we get so enmeshed with who we are and what we do, and our identity becomes really inextricably linked with what we do in life. And when that changes, as it did for me as a skater, not only was my singles competitive career over in an instant, but the glass globe of my identity smashed on the ice beside me. And so separating those and figuring out, who are you? Who am I? Separate to what value do we add in the world and what we do, has become a very important piece that I try to bring to everything that I do. And I think some of the other highlight reel is I built my first company, which you mentioned, Organized for Life. I built it completely wrong. And it took me sitting at the investor table with the term sheet in front of me, having this horrifying moment where I realized that, for a woman who my highest values are family, freedom, adventure. I mean, freedom and adventure were nowhere to be found. I was a stay-at-home CEO, and I knew if I signed my name on that dotted line, I would be signing up for a lifetime of more of that without any freedom or adventure. And so I made the decision to put the pen down on the unsigned sheet, slide it into the middle of the table. And although I didn't know what I was going to do next, I knew that the commitment was I would never again build a company that I couldn't operate from anywhere on the planet. And that was in the early days. This was in 2007. So it wasn't a particularly fashionable idea to go virtual in those days. But I always knew the life I lead today, it was in my heart. I just didn't have the courage to express it until now. And so in 2019, my husband and I and our then 7-year-old daughter, who is now 11 and a half, we sold off our lives other than some rental properties, moved to Africa for a year, and that has spun us now to this global worldpreneurship journey that I'm on, where we're teaching our daughter what it means to be a global citizen. She's going to school in 3 different countries around the world because I'm not a homeschooler. And I think that's the highlight reel to at least get us started. There's enough juice in there for us for a jumping off point.
There is indeed. And, I love that you shared that many of us have our identity kind of commingled with what we do, right? Our role, our position, our company. And I saw that, for several years, I was working as an executive coach on the career side of things with an outplacement firm. excuse me, called Lehigh Harrison. And, when some people were laid off, they were absolutely devastated. It was such a deep grief, as if they had lost a friend, a spouse, a parent. It was intense because their whole identity was gone, and they found themselves without clarity of who they are and their worth, because their worth was in what they did and how people saw them and all of that. And so I'm so grateful that you're doing what you're doing in our world for people to really have their identity in detached from anything outside of them, and also the courage that it took for you to be at that table about to sign on the dotted line, as you said, and realizing this is not aligned with the life I want to live. And it's a really bold move. I imagine that there were a lot of expectations and a lot of time and energy was spent to get to that point, but to honor who you really are is one of the most beautiful gifts that we can give to ourselves. And of course, then the universe, showers us with many gifts when we do that. And that is really inspiring to me personally. So thank you.
Well, just to be clear, I wasn't always that way. That was something I had to learn the lesson the hard way a number of times, where in my soul, I knew that I should say no, but I said yes. And so that big no that I said that day in the boardroom, that was really as a result of a lot of yeses I had said before that should have been those no's. And so it's funny, the things that when we see courage or we see an overnight success or we see these things, we can't help but be like, yes, but not realizing it's a 25-year overnight success, or not realizing that was, the 10th opportunity to say no, or, and yet continue to say yes. So I smile when I hear that. And I really believe with every ounce of my being that courage is something you can practice, and that it's a muscle that will respond the more that you work it. And I do a birthday challenge every year for this exact purpose. It's something that I just try to think of something that gives me sweaty palms, that freaks me out. It might not have anything to do with anyone else, but it's something that really gets me going. And I do that every year as my gift to myself as I turn another year older, so that I can keep that muscle in check, because saying no is as important in life as saying yes, in order to get you to what your heart truly, truly desires.
Wow, thank you. And it also makes me think about kind of the concept of playing a bigger game, right? This podcast is all about helping leaders to do that. And the question is, what is the bigger game? Yes, because bigger game does not necessarily mean that, as in your case, a franchise would grow and expand and so on, right? Playing a bigger game is what our bigger game is. Yes, for you, it was more freedom, more adventure, right? More of those experiences in your life. And so I think that's another thing to consider, right? Because there are many shoulds in our world, right, that we've been conditioned to believe we need in order to play a bigger game, right? Becoming the CEO, or if I'm the CEO, being the CEO of a larger organization, or whatever that is. And that might be, what our heart desires, and it might not be. And so really just pausing to say, what is actually most important to me, and choosing to align our life and our choices with that, with a whole lot of courage often. Because as you said, when we say, yes to something, we say no to something else, and vice versa, right? So knowing what to say yes to and what to say no to is the game. So thank you for that.
Amazing. And, I also think that if we really have that courage to look deep inside our own hearts, our souls, our desires, because oftentimes, I heard this brilliant quote by Deepak Chopra, which is, inherent in every desire are the mechanics for its fulfillment. Mm-hmm. And thinking about that notion allows us to look deep within ourselves, not out into the world, because, we can see what other people are doing, and we could be very excited and inspired by their the role modeling that they're doing for us. But the truth of the matter is that within each of us is already the patterning for everything we need to live the life we were created to live and to be the people we were created to be. And I have this model that I love to share with people when they're really trying to figure out, well, what is that? Because that's such a big, broad question. So if you can imagine 3 circles overlapping like a Venn diagram, where the first circle are your innate gifts. Those were the hardwired things that you came into this body in this lifetime bearing as your strengths. Those innate gifts paired with then the second circle, which is the kind of the skills and the talents that are learned. Those things are oftentimes born from passion as well. So it's not just the education that you received in school, but what's that specialized knowledge that you possess that has been as a result of you going out into the world following your passion? So if the first one is innate and sort of those factory settings, the second one is learned, and then the third one is experienced, ED. And that would be your life story and specifically your adversity. And where those 3 circles cross over from innate to learned to experienced, that's the place that is magic. And it really does take unlayering to get to that essence and that core. But you'll find that the more layers you remove, the more free you are to truly be who you were meant to be.
And so for those listening now that are thinking, okay, my innate gifts, my learned skills and talents, and my experience, yes, those adversities and so on, all those experiences. How do I know what my innate gifts are, right? The learned and the experience, that we can kind of look back but if I don't know what are my, skills that I was born with, those beautiful gems, how do I access that?
Yes. So there are assessments that you can take. For example, Clifton Strengths Finder, which is a Gallup tool, is one that we use a lot that we love. Kolbe is another one, Kolbe, and that takes a look. So Strengths Finder obviously looks at your strengths. Kolbe is your striving mechanism, your innate way that you initiate and take action. There's another one called Print. So those would be assessments, would be one kind of facet. Then there is self-guided exploration, which I'll talk about in a second. And then there's asking other people and getting the 360-degree view. And that asking other people could be talking to them. It could even be, as I did, which I went through my report cards from when I was a little kid with a pencil, and I went looking for common threads that my teachers had said were my strong suits from kindergarten all the way through grade 12. And that's actually how I built my first company, because the first word on every report card was the word organized. So I wrote that down. The second most common thing is that I talk a lot. And the third most common thing is that I had won all these writing awards, essay contests. I'd gone to a young authors conference. I didn't remember any of those things. So I wrote on a blank sheet of paper, speaking, writing, and organizing, and set out to build a career. And as I learned, organizing is actually a skill. It didn't need to be the object of my business. And again, this was like 20 years too soon, because when I started the organizing company, there was no Marie Kondo, there weren't TV shows, there was none of that. So most of my ideas have been about 20 to 25 years too early for when the market was ready for them. But it was a valuable exercise to go through. And then that digging deep into your own self, the self-study part of it, really looking at where you feel called and drawn, and looking also to where you feel called and drawn, but you judge yourself for it. So for example, for me, I grew up in a small town in a very middle-class family where luxury wasn't part of our reality. And as I grew older and started to experience different things, I had this really deep desire to understand luxury, to go to five-star hotels, to have five-star dining experiences. And I judged it. I almost wouldn't even allow myself to like really go there. And one day I realized, oh, isn't that interesting? Here I am enjoying this five-star luxury, realizing I've been judging myself and realizing the way in which that's held me back as a business owner. Because if you can't experience five-star service, you can't teach your team to create that for your customer. And so then once I was able to embrace it and see it for all that it could give me as gifting, I started to see that was part of my path, because that was what I was drawn to inside me that helped to help my business create that reality in the external world.
That is such a phenomenal example of that kind of removing of the layers that you spoke about, because oftentimes the gifts are right in front of us, but we can't quite see them because we have certain beliefs, that might be getting in the way. And so releasing those attachments really is the key to that freedom, which is accessing that which is right there for us, what some might call our divine calling, purpose, path. So let's say we have some clarity of our innate gifts. We have kind of an inventory of all the skills and talents and things that we've learned, and our experiences, right? Some core experiences, peak positive, peak negative experiences, things that have, taught us things and adversities. What do we do with all of that?
Well, in a perfect world, you can combine them for your sort of your true purpose on the planet. And I use the word purpose carefully, but needing a little explanation, because I do believe oftentimes there's one of the true geniuses of our times, Buckminster Fuller, or Bucky Fuller. He has this concept called precession, Precession. And in that concept, he says that your purpose is at a 90-degree angle to your passion or your bliss. And he uses the example of bees, how a bee is going from flower to flower, just drinking in the nectar, following its bliss, yet its purpose is cross-pollination. And so when I think then of the crossover that is your area of in thought leadership, what we would call true authority, that is that magic zone where you are living and operating, almost getting paid or unpaid, because success comes in multi-currencies, but being paid to show up and be who you are. And that is such a magical thing. So if we let's imagine a woman who her innate gifts are communication. She has been a brilliant communicator in one-to-one, on a stage, in the written form. She's just great and always has been. Then let's imagine she went to school and had education as a certified financial planner. And then let's imagine in her adversity or life story circle, she went through a horrible divorce and lost everything. Well, if she were to put those three circles and overlap them and write a book or be a speaker or have something where she's using her true life story along with her learned skills and talents and expressing them through her innate gifts to change lives, now everything that's ever happened to her is able to be paid forward. And that kind of teaching really is magical in creating an ideal target customer who is a former version of yourself. Because I really do believe that our best ideal customer, no matter what business we're in, is a former version of ourselves, because we are uniquely equipped to serve them better than any other person on the planet. And what's so cool about that is if you develop that customer, you're going to keep growing and evolving and have new things to share, which creates a really phenomenal long tail of opportunity for the consumer to continue to support and follow you and learn from you.
Wow. Thank you for clarifying that, because, it also, what you just articulated is kind of like, yes, we may be thought leaders in the area, right? That the middle of that Venn diagram, as you said, and we still keep growing, right? So it's kind of a cool concept to consider, because some of us may say, well, I'm not yet, the thought leader, or I'm just a little thought leader, but I'm not where I want to be, or where I sense I can be. But yet we can still get started, because, those people that we're meant to help will grow with us. And as you said, we'll continue to offer new and different things to them as we ourselves embrace those new and different things and evolve. And I think that just opens up, I imagine, many opportunities for people listening, because, it's like, start where you are, right?
Start where you are and release your attachment to the outcome. Because, for example, if we take a look at my, the book that you referenced that I wrote in the introduction. So I wrote this book on personal branding in 2003. So social media as we know it today hadn't even been invented yet. So MySpace had been invented, but it was kind of for like weird underground bands. It certainly wasn't something that anyone thought would lead to personal branding being the business model of the future. And I would say that to people. I'd be like, it's so exciting. Personal branding is a business model of the future. And what is this chick talking about? And so when I look back at that book now, I like cringe, because as a thought leader, wherever you do start, if you wait to the point where your first product isn't cringeworthy, you've probably waited too long. But that being said, with that first book, this was even the days where I had to buy 2,000 copies and store it in my garage and all of the things. Well, this thing barely sold a copy. And so I ended up pulling it and taking it off the market, because it was like almost like ruining my self-esteem, because I just was like, oh, this is so. In 2018, fast forward 15 years later, I think to myself, okay, well, by this point I'd had my daughter. I thought, if I got hit by a bus, I would at least want my family to know I'd written a book. So almost as a lark, I put it up on Amazon and never really thought another thing of it. It won a national book award that year, an international book award, and I got the call of a lifetime from Purdue University, who said, we're writing an undergrad and a graduate level course on personal branding, and we'd like your book to be the textbook. And so the important thing to know and to trust in all of this is the timing, and to know that you cannot lose what is divinely yours, and just creating unabashedly, fearlessly, like putting things forth, whether we'll wind up cringing at them later or not, trusting that in the right time, they will go where they're meant to go. They will change the lives they're meant to change. And that you can take comfort in knowing that your evolution, if you keep creating, will share the story on your behalf of how you've become who you are in your more polished future version self.
That is beautiful, and a really important reminder for all of us, as you said, to detach from the outcome. And I think that's true for any change that we want to create in our life. It's just so much more fun also when we detach from the outcome, right? Just enjoying the process, really, of creating and, of playing that game. So what do you mean by thought leadership? Like, what is your definition of thought leadership?
Well, oftentimes when people come to us, they come to us because they're looking for a publisher, or they're looking for a ghostwriter to write a book on their behalf. Our family of companies only works in the nonfiction space. And so that's a pretty obvious thing. Then when you have deep expertise in a nonfiction topic, you'll either write the book yourself or you need someone to write it for you. And the first conversation that we have with an aspiring author is we ask them for 2 paradigm shifts that if they can make with us on that first call will change absolutely everything for them. And so a definition of a thought leader is purely just an expert in a specific chosen field. And so thought leader has some egoic energy from a perception standpoint for many people and a bit of a vanity play. Whereas for us, we're really looking to peel away any of that to just focus on the core expertise. But the two paradigm shifts that we ask is, number one, for the purposes of our working relationship, if we can switch from the word author to the term thought leader, because it's a more expansive possibility. Thought leadership can evolve into so many different growth vehicles to express from within. And the second of those shifts would be, instead of coming to us saying, I want to write a book, or I have written a book and I want to get it published, we ask that we reframe the term book and use instead the word curriculum, because we can build an empire around curriculum. So in much that same way as author to thought leader and book to curriculum, it really expands the possibility set. Because to be a thought leader doesn't necessarily mean you will write a book. You could host a podcast. You may want to be a YouTuber. You may choose to use your thought leadership internally as a vehicle to train your team to greatness that never sees the light of day out in the world publicly. And so the word thought leader gives it this nice round world of opportunity versus something that is much more narrow and really defined as an external facing piece. Because a lot of the people we work with, just as the people you work with who want to play a bigger game, that bigger game doesn't have to be on a stage speaking or in anything that is like this vanity driven influencer that you so often hear and associate with the word personal branding. To be a thought leader can be a very private, internal, working one-on-one with your team, infusing your ideas, your values into the culture of a company and or its team members.
So how do we become a thought leader?
Well, many people are already thought leaders who don't even realize that they are, because when we walk through life, I wish I could remember, it's been a part of me for so long, which is ironic when you hear what I'm going to say next, this concept, because I'd love to attribute it to someone if it is theirs. But I've heard it described, or I describe it as having a red light strapped to your forehead. And every room you walk in, all of a sudden, everyone says, oh, it's very red in here all of a sudden. And you say, red? Well, what's red? Because you've lived with your worldview all of your life. So to you, you can't actually see that it's anything to write home about or that it's anything unique and different. And that's kind of the cosmic joke of it all, is that oftentimes our areas of true, deep expertise feel so effortless to us because they are that marriage of innate and learned and experienced, that we think, well, it can't be that because that's too obvious. But what you realize is that other people don't think the same way you do. And the things that you know are very, very often the things other people absolutely unequivocally don't know and need to know and need someone like you to teach them.
That is a really, really cool way to explain it. And I truly believe that that's true. Because, whether it's being on the receiving end of people who share certain things, and I'm just so inspired and delighted, and you're one of them that I hadn't thought of before, right? But a lot of people don't think that it's very unique, let's say, because it's just a way that they've thought or they've talked about it so many times. So it's automatic and natural for them. And so it's really cool, the concept that we already are a thought leader in something, and we just have to essentially uncover, right? Maybe make the unconscious, if it's not yet conscious to us, conscious. And what about for those individuals whose learned skills or talents are not really the direction that they want to go, right? So let's say the financial person that you mentioned, right, in that example, let's say she doesn't want to do that anymore, right? She's not fulfilled by that. Then it's like the things that we've learned aren't really relevant for what we're looking to do, or are they? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, oftentimes it could be that you're retaining the same audience you had before, you're just talking about a different topic. So, because usually when you build a tribe of followers, they're following you much more than they're following your content, unless you're a very technical expert who is talking about something like very, very specific. So shifting your topic could be one of those ways. If you are a corporate escapee, let's call it, where you are trapped inside a corporate prison and you want to become an entrepreneur or something like that, having the get started somewhere, and even if it's as a side hustle, to start to see what works. I was reminded of that this week because with the Authors Academy, we're now taking it from an in-person after school and summer camp program in building a software program. And the team who I'm working with to build the software, the process that they took me through is, okay, tell us what your vision for the software is. And then they met with teen authors, they met with young authors, and they met with little authors, and they heard what they wanted. And that's what we then start to merge and build a software that it accomplishes the empowerment program that I want, disguised as the writing program and the video game immersion that they want. That then you're now building a software people want to buy, versus building a software and going out to try and sell it to a market that it might not be exactly on point. And so I think bringing that same idea home is looking at your innate, your learned, and your experienced, and trying it on for size, asking people, hey, how do you see me combining these things? And then once you've got an idea, before you even start, just start talking to people who might be interested in being your target audience, to say, is this something that you would even, pay for or consider working with me, so that you start to then have a beta that you can quickly have a market for, that makes that pivot so much easier.
Oh, that's wonderful, because it brings the internal and the external together. But I love that we're starting with the internal, right? Those inner gifts, right? The learned things, the experienced things. So to start with that, what is our magic there, right? What's core to us? And, kind of like those bees, what is the passion? What is it that we want to go and smell and do? And right in that example. And then to essentially bring it to the outside and say, hey, what would this be like? And to be flexible and adaptable, not overly attached to a certain vision or plan for how things need to be, but really, I would say, attached to how we want to feel, which is, again, to your point of freedom, adventure, all of that, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter how we get there. If we get there, if we're feeling and living the way that we want to feel and live.
Yes, and also trusting and knowing that is going to change, so that when it changes, it doesn't take you by surprise, because the seasons of our lives really do change dramatically, and having the courage to continue to realign who you are and your external living to the season of life you're headed into. It does take courage, and it's really, really necessary to live playing full out through all the seasons. When I think of what like bliss was for me when our daughter was young, it was having a very traditional, sort of stable, home, and we had a ski condo, and we skied every weekend, and we had this really, Groundhog Day, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And when I started to notice, we're going to the ski hill less and less, and I could watch the seasons of our lives change, And knowing we had this little window from 7 till high school, it's then as you're seeing it change, thinking sometimes, pivoting might not be it. You may have to just be like, rip the, right out from underneath you. And if that's your style, perfect, because that's absolutely my style, is when I see it and I figure out what I'm doing, I just go for it. But that is, again, after years of practice and realizing that failure isn't going to kill me. Mm-hmm. Because just having that confidence that I'm going to mess it up. Absolutely. Whether it goes exactly as planned or it doesn't, either way, I'm going to mess it up. So I might as well just fly fearlessly into the unknown because I'm going to mess it up anyways. And I say I'm going to mess it up with like self-compassion and love, because to me, making a mistake, that is the stuff of life. That is where all the learning takes place. I wish that the word mistake had a hyphen in it so that it was a mistake, so that people realized, oh, hey, that's like how this thing called life works, is we're going to do multiple takes to get this thing right. And yes, we will fall down along the way, but having the courage to reinvent and go for it is such a powerful thing to teach you and show you, because once you get driving in the car of life, even if you set your destination to that feeling of joy and bliss, you'll get off course. But just like a GPS reroutes, rather than going back to where you started, just rerouting back to that and saying, well, is this closer to or further from that feeling, and allowing that to guide your journey. Before you know it, you'll be sailing.
That's just so cool. And there's so much grace and, as you said, kind of self-compassion in there, because there are seasons to life, and it's kind of like the infinity sign. I know we've talked about that before, right? You flow from one thing and then it's no longer as fulfilling or as exciting. And then, you flow to something else. So the real skill here is the ability to trust the process, right? To know the process, like what you're training us on here, to be able to go inward and self-assess, and then go outward and, check it out with other people, and then go for it. And, when it's time for another take, to pursue that too, courageously, because nothing is permanent. And so it does take a certain faith and belief in ourselves to be able to do that, and that the universe is indeed a friendly place that will support us in doing that, should we decide to make the shift. And so if it's all right, I want just for a couple minutes to connect this to personal branding, because some people may be thinking, okay, but if my personal brand is connected to this particular thought leadership content, let's say, or whatever that is, and then I'm looking to pivot, then won't that shift my whole brand? And how does the thought leadership and the personal branding kind of correlate with each other?
Yes. Well, I think that is an offshoot of the model itself, is the thinking that it has to be one, or either or, versus and. So my model of personal branding takes the traditional org chart for a company, or the organizational chart, where you've got the brand at the top and the people at the bottom. And the people spend their whole lives promoting the brand of the company, for example, only to, if it's a senior leader, to retire, or there's an acquisition and all of a sudden they're out, or they get ousted even from their own company like Steve Jobs did. That model of the old school traditional org chart just doesn't give us the flexibility and ability to maneuver in the modern age. And so if you imagine flipping it, where you then become the brand, so you're at the top, then imagine an arrow running through the middle, and then some bubbles underneath. And let's just imagine, because you've now kind of come to know my story a little. So Krista at the top, that arrow of evolution, the first career was figure skating. The second career was organized for life, and so forth and so forth. Well, now my skating, that built credibility in my personal brand, which I then lent to my next endeavor, so that when it goes away, that equity remains intact in the who I am. even if the what I do changes. And that's why that arrow is so important, because the what we do is going to change. And with Organized for Life, it was a consumer-facing brand that did have an org chart below it, so that when it goes away, again, the whole rest of the empire remains intact, and I can continue to move using the credibility and the experiences that I've built from those previous endeavors. And as you start to see what are the common threads through all of those different things that you've done. So for me as a woman, it is the passionate art of self-expression. Because whether it's how you organize your space, whether it's your personal brand, whether it's how I live my life as, trying to build the most badass, bold life that I can that feels right to me, all of those things fall cleanly under that broad umbrella of the passionate art of self-expression. And so I think that personal branding really is figuring out the who you are piece that's at the top, and then really seeing what you're creating and what you're committed to creating for your lifetime. And so helping people to become the people they were created to be and to live the lives they were created to live, that is at the heart of my passion, whether it's through businesses I own, whether it's through the books that we help people write or the books we publish on their behalf. It doesn't matter. That still remains the same. So once you know that point of continuity, that's really what makes it all makes sense to the consumer. And, I was on a silent retreat. I've done 3 10-day silent retreats in my life, which the first one started as a birthday challenge. And when I was on this one particular retreat, when we came back out of silence, I happened to go into the village on this island that I was on, and I walked into a store called Christy Grace. And it was so interesting to me because there was jewelry, but then there was this very interesting music that totally caught me as I was shopping. And I did purchase something there. And what I learned is that Christy Grace is the name of the proprietor who designs the jewelry. She's also a jazz musician. So it was her music playing over the loudspeaker. And it really showed me in a 3-dimensional way that art, when done by the same artist, makes sense to the consumer. And that's how I think you see these revolutionaries, even as early back in time as Leonardo da Vinci, who was as prolific as an inventor as he was an artist. And being able to have the brand of who you are is the most consistent way throughout the course of your lifetime that you will become known for the art you deliver on the planet. And it can change because who you are won't.
Thank you. And I think that that's really the essence of our conversation, is that who we are at the core is who we are. And that won't change with the seasons, and that won't change with the topics, and that won't change with what's happening in our lives. And I think that taking the time to go inward and look and say, who are we and what is important to me now, and is really important work to do. And so as we complete here, what is one step that you recommend for people to do, kind of as a takeaway from our conversation and action, if you will, to get them started on this path if they do desire to be an expert, a thought leader in some area of their life?
I would explore the 3 circles. I would explore your ideal day and your ideal week to really get into a juicy visualization of what you can imagine without constraints. Because inside that ideal day or ideal week, there will be little winks and nods to the pieces that are those building blocks, whether it was luxury for me or, if it was extreme greatness for someone else, like whatever their brand of interesting in an ideal day scenario, I think that you can start to pull those things out. And then when you see the 3 circles, that's almost the who you are and the what you do, and starting to marry those into a vision that you can just start small and test out and play with without needing to feel too attached.
I'm just giving you a huge, huge hug right now, because I think you've helped many, many people to explore what might be possible for them, or what else might be possible for them. And so how can people engage with the many programs that you offer? I know you do great work. Where can we find you?
Well, because I too am an ever-changing being, KristaClivesmith.com is the best place to always go, because the website does continue to be a living, breathing extension of the offerings that we have at the time. Because I really do imagine this virtual theme park for thought leaders that we're building, with all the different lands of writing and publishing and speaking and personal branding and the kids piece. That continuing to grow and grow. And so practicing what I preach, a lot of people are like, oh, isn't it too egoic to have your own name.com? And this is why, as authors, you can use a pen name and create a character like Mr. Beast has done. Or, there are a lot of different ways you can do it if you don't want to use your first and last name. But what I do suggest is creating something where then you have a way to display the art and the working body of work and body of art that you're creating in the world, even if it is like your athletic career as a teenager, having an athlete website that then when you go to college, if that shifts, keeping it updated. So that, because I think in doing that, it helps you to gain even more clarity of what are those pieces that were the same when I was an athlete, or the next career, or the next piece, so that you'll start to figure out what that arrow is for yourself as well.
Beautiful. Once again, thank you so much, Krista, for being here and sharing your incredible experiences and learnings with the rest of us.
Well, thank you so, so much for having me. The privilege and the honor truly is all mine.